Shorten your way on this trip to the Lit Lodge should tell tales about adventures that happened formerly. And don't forget to be safe and have fun.
After high school to a college I went, an immense amount of money I spent. It was pointless, although I learned a lot. It got me nowhere. Government I fought. How dare Big Brother make me pay for school, take all of my money, and make me their tool? How come high schools push college onto us, force us to make big choices? What's the rush? I can't say I regret my time spent there. I met my best friend Christy. What a pair. To travel the world is what we would like, and go to Europe to ride their bikes, through France to see the great Eiffel Tower, to meet new people, those of higher power, to travel the world with no time to spare. Time well wasted, college failed to prepare. There once was a girl freshly out of high school by 10 years. Her future upon graduation was so very promising, graduating with honors, heading to a 4-year college, and getting a head start on her career. The whole world was at her fingertips. Still bright with her youthful age, Kristen headed to the college of her dreams to become a forensic chemist. Throughout her years as a high school student, teachers and counselors constantly expressed how much better college would be and how important it would be to make something of herself. Similar expectations followed her throughout college as well. Upon her arrival, she learned more in the first month than ever in her high school career and carried that knowledge with her through it all. However, immediately following her graduation, she realized things were not as they first appeared. College, in fact, did not prepare her for any of the real-world problems she faced. It did not prepare her for the difficulty she would have in finding a job that paid more than minimum wage, or how to pay bills and keep track of her credit score, or even how to balance a checkbook. Although it did not provide her the necessary information to actually survive in an unsheltered society, it did introduce her to her best friend, Bray. Through all the hard times and confusions once in the real world, she and Christy were able to pull through together. They found an apartment to share in the city of Seattle, and each held up her share of the weight responsibly. The apartment was perfect for the two of them. Double vanity sinks in the bathroom, a big kitchen, 2 bedrooms, nice living space, and for a great price, too. This, much like college, also was not as it seemed. The landlords were unmanageable, the neighbors too rowdy, and the appliances soon fell apart. Both Christy and Kristen worked part-time as waitresses, earning minimum wage and untaxed tips. However, this too was not as they expected. The customers were rich and snobby and tipped very poorly. Their shifts never overlapped, and each came home at night in the worst possible mood due to rude, cruel customers and horrible bosses. What little tips they made were combined to put in case of an emergency or travel jar, and the rest of their paycheck was spent in its entirety on food, bills, and utilities. Luckily, gas was not a problem because they could not afford to keep their car, and most everything was in walking distance. Instead of paying for gas, they were forced to replace their shoes every month and had to buy inserts to compensate for the back problems walking created. Though college failed to prepare them for what the world they blindly walked into, it showed them that not everything is as it seems and that they should hope for the best while simultaneously expecting the worst.
I gained a friend and kept her, named Kristen. Graduated from high school, college, in years 10. With a major in psych, unexpected. There were no jobs in that I wanted. Options are few. Waitressing gets me by. Sometimes I make enough tips I don't cry. Living alone is hard. Kristen and I have decided to rent a house, not buy. I know this is not a shock. We make just enough. Paycheck to paycheck, save we must. Hopefully to cross that pond, spend time in culture, landmarks daily, pizza, Eiffel, towers. Maybe we will stay. Europe has so much. Life is meant to be beautiful. Such good things can happen to us. The world is potentially, hopefully, filled with bliss. From the time children can learn lessons, parents tell them aphorisms, such as, there are 2 sides to every coin, or treat others the way you want to be treated, and on the flip side. In my experience, those aphorisms are for children to know to apologize. But flash forward a couple years and suddenly, relationships and apologies get tougher and tougher to say to people as everyone matures. A man and a woman in a corporate office had been married for a very long time, but then they decided to get a divorce. The man, Christian, began to become very close friends with another woman, Clarissa. They began to spend time together and made it very obvious that they had feelings for one another. The problem that the almost ex-wife had was that people in the office were telling her that Christian and Clarissa were doing adult things before her divorce was finalized. She confronted him in the break room and demanded, "You have to stop having other relationships while we are still legally married. You couldn't even wait until it was finalized?" She went on and on about how outraged she was that he was committing adultery against her and not giving him a chance to tell his side, until she finally took a breath in and allowed him to speak. He told her, "Jessica, you know me. I am honest and I did not want this divorce to anger you. Clarissa and I have been friends since high school, and she is the only one in this office who I know besides you. Don't you think that I need someone to talk to about this divorce? I haven't been able to talk about this and I really need to get it out. Of course I'm not cheating on you. I would at least wait until this whole thing was finalized." This thought, that Christian would need someone to talk to that was not her, had never struck her before. While she was a little hurt that he could not come and talk to her about it, she understood why he had done what he did. She apologized to him and told him she should not have been so rude and controlling without knowing the flip side of the situation.
I moved away to a college level. Some regret words, I regret several. Leaving alone, I left all of my friends. In the back of my mind, it was the end. All of my life, I have managed great grades, knowing the consequences if I stayed. Pride in myself, I could not stay quiet. Without knowing, it started a riot. Friends lost their advantage to move along, knowing their feelings, my boasting was wrong. Starting my adventures with a new life, of 3 I am a mother, and 1 a wife. With a job in environment studies, the people with me were not my buddies. Constantly thinking about what I said, all because the listeners had no bed.
A young girl was walking through her town to get food from the church. Her mother died before the girl got to know her, and her dad was a drunk. At home, she hid under her blankets on her mattress on the floor and dreamt of a life she wished she had. She wished she was like the other girls with parents who loved them and with fresh cooked food in their stomachs every night. On her walk to the schoolhouse, she felt as though someone was walking behind her. She turned to look, and a brief shadow was seen. She heard sticks break and the wind began to pick up speed. "I must find a spot beside this path and pray to my protector for my safety," she said as she walked off the path and got on her knees and prayed to the Virgin Lady. "Oh, Mother, great Mary, I have been faithful to you. I ask your protection from the evils of the world and ask you to keep me safe." Just as she began to stand and continue her journey, she was pushed on the ground and all went black. Oh, how bad she hurt. She tried her best to make it home. She ran in her room, cleaned the mess, and cried until she fell asleep once again. The next couple of weeks went by, and while she was in class one day, she felt warmth coming up her throat, and out it came. She vomited everywhere, in front of every eye of every person she'd ever met. The teacher sent her to the nurse. While the nurse was asking questions about her eating habits, up came the vomit again. "My dear, you must go to the hospital," the nurse said, making the call to make the appointment. "No, my father will be so mad if I go anywhere other than the school. Oh, great Virgin, help me." The young girl burst into tears and could hardly breathe. "I will take you, and we will not tell your father, but you must go," the nurse said. The nurse helped the young girl to her feet, and thus they arrived at the hospital. Into the room the young girl went as the nurse waited. Thinking the nurse was the child's guardian, the truth came from the doctor. The young girl was pregnant. The nurse felt angry with the child. How unclean she was, not married but pregnant. Mad because of the child's sins, she left the child at the hospital to cope with her sins alone. Watching the nurse leave her alone, the child had no choice but to start walking home, weeping more and more with every step she took. When she walked home, it was far past the time her dad expected her. Drunk and frustrated, he beat the young pregnant girl. Once the worst was done, she went in her room and spoke to her Virgin Mary. "Why must you treat me this way? Because the sin has been committed out of my control? I trusted you with my protection, and that is not what you gave. With nothing and no one else to believe in, how could you mistreat me so? You are no idol of mine, and I am no longer a child of yours." With these words spoken, she cried herself to sleep. The next morning, she began her walk with bruises on her face from her father and bruises on her body from the unknown man. She hid behind a bush and heard the voices of 2 young girls. "How could someone have a child when they are not committed to a man? My mother told me never to speak to such a sinful person," remarked the first girl. "My mother has said the same, and I agree. It is the worst sin I could think imaginable. When I see her today, crying the fake tears she always cries, I will laugh at her face," the second girl said. The child could not believe her ears. With shame in herself, she cried even harder and thought of a resolution to end all of her pain. With a rock beside her, she had brought it to her head and became reunited with her mother. People must be careful of what they say, for they know no one else's story.
Some regret words, I regret several. Leaving alone, I left all of my friends. In the back of my mind, it was the end. All of my life, I've managed great grades, knowing the consequences.